A woman in a blood-soaked wedding dress stumbled into a dying ranch at dawn, abandoned, blamed, and hunted. The rancher raised his rifle, ready to kill another thief. But when her trembling hands touched his dying mare, everything changed. She wasn't there to steal. She was there to survive. And survival in the unforgiving frontier meant fighting powerful enemies who would burn entire towns to protect their secrets. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The first gunshot came at 3 in the morning. Rowan Cade jolted awake in darkness, his hand already reaching for the Winchester propped against the bedpost. Another shot cracked through the night air, closer this time, somewhere near the south pasture. He didn't bother with boots, just grabbed the rifle and moved. The ranch house door hung crooked on its hinges. Had for months. No money to fix it, no hands left to help. Just Rowan and the ghosts of better years. Outside, the Wyoming wind cut through his undershirt like a rusty blade. The moon hung low and useless, barely lighting the path to the barn. His cattle, what was left of them, were bellowing in panic. That sound used to mean coyotes or wolves. Now it meant something worse. Thieves. Rowan's jaw clenched as he crossed the yard. 6 head lost last month. 4 the month before. Each one stolen clean in the night while he slept like a fool. The sheriff did nothing. Said Rowan probably miscounted, as if a man could miscount his own livelihood disappearing. He reached the barn and pressed his back against the weathered wood, rifle raised. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear, but from exhaustion. 3 years since Martha died. 3 years of this ranch eating him alive, one disaster after another. Sometimes he wondered if he should just let it all go. Sell to the railroad company, take their blood money, and leave. But leaving meant admitting defeat, and Rowan Cade didn't know how to do that. He edged around the corner, finger on the trigger. That's when he saw her. A woman. Collapsed in the dirt just inside the barn entrance, her dress spread around her like spilled paint. Except it wasn't paint. Even in the weak moonlight, Rowan could see the dark stains covering the white fabric. Blood, fresh enough to still be wet. His rifle didn't waver. Don't move. She didn't respond. Didn't even flinch. For a second, Rowan thought she might be dead. Then her shoulders hitched, a sharp, broken breath that sounded like drowning. I said don't move. He stepped closer, boots crunching on hay, hands where I can see them. Slowly, painfully, the woman lifted her head. Her face was a mess, hair matted with dirt and blood, one eye swollen shut, lips cracked and bleeding. But it was her other eye that stopped him cold, wide, desperate, completely hollow. She looked at him the way a cornered animal looks at a predator, like she'd already accepted death and was just waiting for it to hurry up. Please. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I didn't. Save it. Rowan kept the rifle trained on her chest. You with the others? The one stealing my cattle? She blinked slowly, confusion flickering across her battered face. I haven't. Answer the question. I don't know what you're talking about. She tried to sit up straighter and immediately gasped, clutching her ribs. I just needed somewhere to what? Hide? Rowan's finger tightened on the trigger. Who sent you? The railroad? Voss's people? Nobody sent me. Tears cut clean tracks through the dirt on her face. I have nowhere else to go. A lie. Had to be. Nobody wandered onto a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere wearing a goddamn wedding dress, unless they were running a con. And Rowan had seen enough cons to recognize the setup. He should shoot her, or at least drag her off his property, and let the wilderness finish what someone else had started. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she held herself, broken but not beaten. Or maybe it was just that Rowan was so damn tired of being alone on this cursed piece of land that even a lying thief seemed better than nothing. Get up, he said finally. She stared at him. What? You deaf? Get up. I can't. Then crawl, but you're not staying in my barn. She tried. Actually tried to stand, pushing herself up on trembling arms. Made it about 6 inches before her strength gave out, and she collapsed again, harder this time. The impact forced a cry from her throat, raw and animal and completely genuine. Rowan swore under his breath. He lowered the rifle slightly, watching her struggle, watching her fail. "What happened to you?" he asked, though he wasn't sure why it mattered. The woman's good eye fixed on him. "Does it matter?" "Might." "Why?" Good question. Rowan didn't have a good answer, just a gut feeling that this woman, whoever she was, hadn't come here to steal from him. She'd come here because she literally had no other choice. "Because I need to know if someone's coming after you," he said. "If you brought trouble to my door." "Trouble already found me." She coughed and blood flecked her lips. "I'm just trying to survive it." The mare in the stall behind her shifted, letting out a low, pained sound. Rowan glanced past the woman and felt his stomach drop. Duchess. His best breeding mare. She was down on her side, breathing in short, labored gasps. White foam dripped from her mouth. "Damn it!" Rowan pushed past the woman, crouching beside the horse. Duchess's eyes rolled back, showing white. Her body trembled violently. "Not you too." He'd already lost 3 horses this month. All the same symptoms: fever, tremors, frothing at the mouth. The veterinarian had come twice and left both times with no answers, and a bill Rowan couldn't afford. Said it might be poison, might be disease, might be bad luck. Whatever it was killing everything Rowan had left. "She's dying," the woman said quietly behind him. "I can see that." Rowan ran his hand along Duchess's neck. The mare's coat was slick with sweat. Her pulse hammered erratically under his palm. "Nothing I can do about it." "Maybe there is." Rowan turned. The woman had somehow dragged herself closer, inches at a time, leaving a smeared trail in the dirt. Up close, she looked worse, younger than he'd first thought, maybe mid-20s. Pretty, once, before someone had beaten that out of her. "You a veterinarian?" he asked. "No." "Then shut up and let me handle this." She ignored him. Instead, she reached out with one shaking hand toward Duchess's muzzle. Rowan almost stopped her. The mare was unpredictable when sick, dangerous. But something made him wait. The woman's fingers brushed against Duchess's nose. The effect was immediate. The mare's trembling stopped. Her breathing, which had been shallow and rapid, deepened into something almost normal. Her wild eyes calmed, focusing on the woman with something that looked like recognition. Rowan stared. "What did you do?" "Nothing." The woman's hand moved slowly along Duchess's face, gentle and deliberate. "I'm just listening." "Listening to what?" "To what she's trying to tell us." The woman's eye, the one that wasn't swollen shut, narrowed in concentration. Then she leaned forward, pressing her ear against the mare's neck. Listening. Actually listening, like the animal might whisper secrets. Rowan should have stopped her, should have pulled her away and thrown her out. But he didn't. Because Duchess, who had been dying 30 seconds ago, was now breathing steadily, calm, like the woman's touch had flipped some invisible switch. After a long moment, the woman sat back. "It's not disease." "What?" "Your horse. She's not sick. None of them are." She looked up at Rowan, and he saw absolute certainty in that one good eye. "They're being poisoned." The word hit Rowan like a fist to the gut. "Poisoned." "Yes." "By who?" "Not by who. By what?" She gestured weakly toward the water trough in the corner of the stall. "The water. Something's wrong with it." Rowan followed her gaze. The trough looked normal, just water, same as always. He filled it himself every morning from the well. "That's impossible. I've been drinking from that well for 10 years. Then something changed. The woman's voice was fading, strength draining out of her with each word. "You need to test it, find the source, because whatever's in that water is killing everything that drinks it." She slumped forward, unconscious before she hit the ground. Rowan caught her before her head cracked against the barn floor. For a moment, he just knelt there, holding a stranger covered in blood and wearing a destroyed wedding dress, while his dying mare breathed steadily behind him. None of this made sense, but the mare was calm now, alive. And if this woman was right, if the water really was poisoned, then Rowan had just found the answer to a question that had been destroying him for months. He looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, bruised, broken, running from something bad enough to leave her like this. Smart move would be to leave her in town. Let someone else deal with her problems. But Rowan Cade had stopped making smart moves a long time ago. He carried her into the house. Morning came too fast and too bright. Rowan woke slumped in a chair beside the guest bed. Martha's old sewing room, back when Martha was alive and this house felt like a home instead of a tomb. The woman was still unconscious, breathing shallow but steady. He'd cleaned the worst of the blood off her face, wrapped her ribs with strips torn from old bedsheets. She had 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and bruises that told a story Rowan didn't want to read. Someone had hurt her, badly, deliberately. He should care more about that. Should ask questions when she woke up. But right now, all Rowan cared about was whether she'd been telling the truth about the water. He left her sleeping and headed for the well. The morning sun turned the Wyoming grassland into rolling gold, beautiful in the way that dying things sometimes are. Rowan's ranch stretched out before him, 200 acres that had once supported 50 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and a small crew of ranch hands. Now it was down to 23 cattle, 4 horses, and nobody but Rowan. The well sat in the center of the yard, hand-dug stone lined with mortar. Rowan lowered the bucket and pulled up water that looked clean and clear, smelled normal, tasted fine when he sipped it. But Duchess had calmed the moment that woman touched her, and every animal that drank from this well had gotten sick. Rowan dumped the bucket and headed for the barn, found Duchess standing in her stall, alert and hungry. No tremors, no foam. She looked better than she had in weeks. "I'll be damned," Rowan muttered. He spent the next hour checking every water source on the property. The trough in the barn, the creek that ran through the south pasture, the auxiliary well near the old bunkhouse, took samples in mason jars, labeled them, lined them up on the porch rail. When he came back inside, the woman was awake. She sat propped against the headboard, one arm wrapped around her ribs, watching him with that same wary look from last night, like she expected him to hit her. Or worse. "You're still here," she said quietly. "It's my house." "I meant, you didn't leave me in the barn." Rowan shrugged. Seemed cruel. "Most men wouldn't care. Most men are bastards." He grabbed the chair and sat down, keeping distance between them. "Your mare theory. I need to know more." The woman blinked, surprised. "You believe me?" Duchess is standing, eating, acting normal for the first time in 3 weeks. Rowan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So yeah, I believe you. Now tell me how you knew." She was quiet for a long moment, absently touching the bruises on her face. "My mother had a gift. She could read animals, understand what was wrong with them when nobody else could. I inherited some of that." "Some?" "Enough to know when something's dying from poison instead of disease." She met his eyes. "The symptoms are different, subtle, but they're there." Rowan processed that. "And you just felt it? Looking at my horse?" "I listened. Animals communicate differently than people. You just have to pay attention." It sounded insane. Felt insane. But Duchess was alive, and that counted for more than logic. "All right," Rowan said. "So if it's poison in the water, where's it coming from?" "I don't know. Could be natural contamination, arsenic, mercury, something leaching from the ground, or it could be deliberate." Deliberate. The word settled in Rowan's chest like a stone. "You think someone's poisoning my water? I think you should consider it." "Who the hell would—" Rowan stopped, because he knew exactly who would. Who had the money, the resources, and the motive to destroy him slowly enough that nobody would question it. Vivian Voss. The woman watched his expression change. "You know who it is?" "Maybe." Rowan stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the land stretched empty and indifferent. "There's a woman. Her family owns the railroad company expanding through this territory. They've been trying to buy my ranch for 2 years. I keep refusing." "Why?" "Because it's mine." The words came out harder than he meant them. "My grandfather built this place from nothing. My father died defending it. And I'll be damned if I sell it to some entitled railroad heiress who thinks money can buy anything." "Even if it costs you everything?" Rowan looked back at her. "Even then." The woman nodded slowly, like she understood something about him that he hadn't said out loud. "So what are you going to do?" "Find the source, prove it, and then—" He stopped himself. What came after proof? The sheriff wouldn't help. The law favored people with money and power, and Rowan had neither. "And then you'll be exactly where you are now," the woman finished for him. "Alone, outgunned, fighting people who play by different rules. You got a better idea? No. She shifted, wincing at the pain in her ribs. But I know what it's like to fight powerful people who want to destroy you. And I know you can't do it alone. Rowan studied her, this broken stranger in a blood-soaked wedding dress who had somehow diagnosed his dying mare in 30 seconds. What's your name? She hesitated, like the answer might cost her something. Evelyn. Evelyn Mercer. And what happened to you, Evelyn Mercer? Her jaw tightened. I got left at the altar by a man who stole my family's savings and disappeared. The whole town blamed me for being stupid enough to trust him. So I left. Left to where? Nowhere. Anywhere. She looked down at her ruined dress. Just away. Rowan recognized that look, that desperation. He'd felt it himself plenty of times over the past 3 years. And the blood? Town didn't want to let me go quietly. Some of them thought I was in on the con. Decided to teach me a lesson about lying to decent people. Her voice stayed flat, emotionless, like she was describing something that happened to someone else. I fought back. They fought harder. You kill anyone? No. Shame. Sounds like they deserved it. That got the ghost of a smile from her. Barely there, gone in a second. You're very casual about murder. I'm casual about justice. There's a difference. Rowan moved back to the chair, sitting heavily. Look, I don't know you. Don't know if you're telling the truth about any of this, but my horse is alive and that's worth something. So here's the deal. You stay here, help me figure out what's poisoning my water, and I'll give you shelter until you're healed enough to move on. Evelyn stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I need help, and you need a place to hide. Seems fair. Nothing about this is fair. No, Rowan agreed. But it's the best offer either of us is getting. She considered that, weighing options she probably didn't have. Finally, she nodded. All right. But when this is over, when we find your poison source, I leave. No questions. No debts. Deal. They shook on it. Her hand was small in his, cold and trembling, but her grip was firm. Rowan had no idea he'd just made a decision that would change everything. The old mining camp sat 3 miles upstream, abandoned for 20 years and slowly being reclaimed by the wilderness. Rowan had forgotten it existed until Evelyn suggested checking it. Mines leak, she'd said that morning over weak coffee. Especially old ones. Heavy metals, sulfides, all kinds of contamination. If there's a mine upstream from your well, that could be your source. Made sense. Rowan had gathered his testing supplies, helped Evelyn onto his spare horse. She could barely sit upright, but she refused to stay behind, and they'd ridden out together in tense silence. Now they stood at the edge of what used to be the Copper Ridge mine, staring at a landscape that looked like something had died and rotted into the earth. The ground around the old mine entrance was stained orange and red, chemical colors that didn't belong in nature. A small creek trickled out from the mine shaft, running downhill toward Rowan's property, toward his well. There, Evelyn pointed at the water with a shaking hand. That's your problem. Rowan crouched beside the creek and dipped his fingers in. The water felt slick, wrong. When he lifted his hand, an oily sheen caught the sunlight. Son of a bitch. Acid mine drainage, Evelyn said. The mine's been leaching toxins into the watershed for years, maybe decades. Every time it rains, more poison washes downstream and into my water supply. Yes, Rowan stood, fury building in his chest. Not at Evelyn, not even at the mine itself, but at his own stupidity. He should have checked this years ago, should have investigated when the first animal got sick instead of blaming bad luck and mysterious disease. Can it be fixed? He asked. Evelyn climbed down from her horse carefully, moving like every step hurt. Which it probably did. Fixed? Maybe. Remediated. But it would take money, engineers, time you probably don't have, so my ranch is dead. Not necessarily. She walked closer to the mine entrance, studying the ground. If you reroute your water supply, drill a new well upstream from the contamination, haul clean water from town, your animals will recover. The land can heal if you stop the exposure. That's months of work, thousands of dollars I don't have. I know. Rowan kicked a rock, watching it tumble down the slope. I can't afford to fix this. Can't afford to keep operating without water. And I sure as hell can't afford to sell at this point. Nobody wants contaminated land. The railroad company does. He turned to look at her. What? They don't care about contamination. They're tearing up the land anyway to lay track. Evelyn's expression was unreadable. That's why they've been pressuring you to sell. They probably already know about the mine drainage. The implications hit Rowan like a physical blow. They knew. This whole time they knew my ranch was poisoned, and they said nothing, because it serves their purpose. You're desperate, losing livestock, running out of options. Eventually you'll have no choice but to sell at whatever price they offer. Those bastards. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. They let my animals die. Let me think I was going crazy. All so they could get my land cheaper. Welcome to frontier capitalism, Evelyn said dryly. The powerful crush the powerless and call it progress. Rowan wanted to break something, burn something, ride straight to the Voss estate and put his fist through Vivian's smug face. But violence wouldn't solve this. Violence would just give them an excuse to have him arrested or killed. So what do I do? He asked quietly. Evelyn was silent for a long moment, staring at the poisoned creek. When she spoke, her voice was hard. You fight back. Document everything. Get proof of the contamination. Hire a lawyer if you can. Make noise until someone with power actually listens. Nobody's going to listen to a failing rancher. Then you make them listen. Rowan laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. You got more faith in the system than I do. I have zero faith in the system, but I have faith in stubbornness. She turned to face him fully. You didn't give up when your wife died. Didn't give up when your cattle started dying. You're still here, still fighting, even when every rational person would have quit. That counts for something. Or it makes me an idiot. Maybe both. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. But you're my kind of idiot. Despite everything, Rowan found himself almost smiling back. That's supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation. They stood there in the poisoned landscape, two broken people who had nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for. Rowan didn't know if they could win, didn't even know if winning was possible against people as powerful as the Voss family. But he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't giving up. Not today. All right, he said finally. We document everything, build a case, and we make those railroad bastards regret ever setting foot on my land. Evelyn nodded. Then we better get started. They rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed higher, already planning their next move. Neither of them noticed the rider watching from the ridge above, a man in an expensive coat who'd been paid very well to make sure Rowan Cade never figured out the truth. And now that he had, things were about to get much worse. Evelyn spent the next 3 days documenting everything. She mapped the creek flow from the mine to Rowan's property, took water samples at 6 different points, photographed the chemical staining around the mine entrance with Rowan's old camera. Her ribs screamed with every movement, but she didn't stop. Rowan watched her work with a mixture of respect and confusion. This woman, who'd shown up dying in his barn less than a week ago, was now orchestrating an investigation with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Where'd you learn all this? He asked on the 3rd day, finding her crouched beside the creek with a notebook, sketching the drainage patterns. My father was a surveyor before he died, she said without looking up. He taught me to document everything, said evidence was the only thing that couldn't be argued with. He was wrong. People argue with evidence all the time. Then you find better evidence. She finished her sketch and stood, favoring her injured side. How many ranch hands do you have? None. Can't afford them. You're running this whole place alone? For 2 years now, yeah. Evelyn looked around at the sprawling ranch, the fences that needed mending, the barn that needed repair, the cattle scattered across acres of poisoned land. That's impossible. Tell that to the Bills. She shook her head slowly. You're going to kill yourself trying to do this alone. Probably. Rowan took off his hat, wiping sweat from his forehead. But dying working my own land beats dying in some city doing work I hate. That's not noble. That's just stubborn. Same thing, different words. Evelyn actually laughed at that. A real laugh, short and surprised, like she'd forgotten how. It changed her face completely, made her look younger, less broken. Rowan found himself staring. She noticed. The laugh died. She turned back to her notebook, walls slamming back into place. We should head back, storm coming. She was right. Dark clouds were building on the horizon, the kind that brought violent rain and flash floods. They packed up quickly and rode for the ranch, making it back just as the first drops started falling. That night, the storm hit hard. Rain hammered the roof like bullets. Wind screamed through the gaps in the barn walls. Rowan lay awake in his bed, listening to the ranch groan and creak under the assault. Around midnight, he heard footsteps in the hallway. He found Evelyn standing at the kitchen window, wrapped in one of Martha's old shawls, staring out at the storm. She didn't turn when he approached. Can't sleep? Rowan asked. Never could, not during storms. Bad memories? Something like that. She touched the bruise on her face, fading now, yellowing at the edges. The night I left town, it was raining, just like this. Rowan leaned against the counter, giving her space. You don't have to talk about it. I know. But she kept talking anyway. His name was Thomas. Thomas Whitmore, smooth talker, handsome. Showed up in our town 6 months ago with big plans and bigger promises. Said he was going to open a general store, invest in the community, build something that would last. Let me guess. He needed startup money. My father had savings, life insurance money from when my mother died. Thomas convinced us to invest. Her reflection in the window looked hollow. The wedding was supposed to be the beginning of our new life together. He told me I looked beautiful, kissed my hand, and then he just left. Took the money and disappeared while I stood at the altar like an idiot. You're not an idiot for trusting someone. Tell that to everyone in town who lost their savings because I vouched for him. Her voice cracked. Tell that to my father, who died of a heart attack 2 weeks later when he realized what we'd done. Rowan was quiet, letting her words settle. Outside, lightning split the sky. After the funeral, people started talking, Evelyn continued. Said I must have been in on it. Why else would such a handsome, successful man want to marry a plain girl like me? They said I helped him steal from them, that I was playing innocent to avoid consequences. That's ridiculous. Is it? I had no proof I wasn't involved. No way to prove Thomas didn't share the money with me. So the rumors got worse. People I'd known my whole life started crossing the street to avoid me. Someone threw rocks through my window. Someone else left a dead cat on my porch with a note calling me a whore and a thief. Jesus. The sheriff said if I didn't like it, I should leave. So I did. Packed what I could carry and started walking. She finally turned to look at Rowan. 3 men from town followed me. Said they wanted justice. What they wanted was to hurt someone, and I was convenient. The bruises on her face suddenly made horrifying sense. They beat you, Rowan said quietly. They tried to kill me. Would have, probably, if I hadn't fought back hard enough to run. She pulled the shawl tighter. I walked for 2 days. No food, no water. Just kept moving until I couldn't anymore. And then I saw your barn. Lucky you found me. Was it? She looked at him with those sharp, damaged eyes. Or did I just trade one bad situation for another? That depends. You think I'm going to hurt you? I don't know what to think about you. Fair enough. Rowan barely knew what to think about himself these days. For what it's worth, I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to let anyone else hurt you while you're on my land. Why? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. Because nobody deserves what happened to you. He met her gaze steadily. And because I know what it's like to lose everything and have people act like you deserve it. Something shifted in Evelyn's expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of trust. Like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Your wife, she said. How did she die? Most people didn't ask directly. They danced around it, offered condolences without details, treated grief like something too fragile to touch. Rowan appreciated Evelyn's bluntness. Fever, he said. Came on fast. By the time we got her to a doctor, it was too late. She died 3 days after getting sick. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He looked out at the storm. Afterward, people said maybe it was for the best. Said Martha was too soft for ranch life anyway. Too delicate. Like her dying proved she didn't belong here. That's cruel. That's frontier thinking. Everything's a test. Everyone's being judged. And if you fail, if you die or go broke or get betrayed, it must mean you deserved it somehow. Evelyn nodded slowly. The strong survive. The weak perish. And the system is always fair. Exactly. Except it's not. No, Rowan agreed. It's not. They stood together in the dark kitchen, watching the storm rage outside. Two people who'd been chewed up and spit out by a world that didn't care if they lived or died. But they were still here, still breathing, still fighting. That had to count for something. Morning brought news that changed everything. Rowan was checking the fences when he saw the rider approaching, a young man he vaguely recognized from town, looking nervous. "Mr. Cade?" The kid pulled his horse to a stop, out of breath. "You need to come to town. Now." "Why?" "There's a meeting. About your ranch. The railroad company called it. Everyone's there." Rowan's stomach dropped. "Everyone?" "Everyone who matters. Sheriff, mayor, town council, and Miss Voss." The kid's expression said that was the important part. "She's saying things, bad things, about you and the woman staying with you." Evelyn. They were talking about Evelyn. Rowan didn't waste time asking questions. He saddled his horse, told Evelyn to stay inside and keep the rifle close, and rode hard for town. The meeting was being held in the town hall, a cramped, stuffy building that smelled like old wood and older money. Rowan pushed through the doors and found exactly what he expected. Vivian Voss standing at the front of the room like she owned it, because in most ways that mattered, she did. Vivian was beautiful in the calculated way rich people often were. Perfect posture, expensive dress, blonde hair arranged just so. She'd been trying to marry Rowan for 2 years, ever since Martha died. Not because she loved him, but because she wanted his ranch. When he refused her, she'd taken it personally. "Rowan." Vivian's smile was sharp as broken glass. "So glad you could join us." "What the hell is this?" Rowan looked around the room. Every seat was filled. The sheriff stood in the corner, arms crossed. The mayor sat at the front table, looking uncomfortable. "This is an intervention," Vivian said smoothly. "For your own good, of course. We're worried about you." "Worried?" "Yes. You've been through so much tragedy, lost your wife, losing your ranch, and now we hear you've taken in a stranger, a woman with a very questionable past." Rowan's jaw clenched. "Where I get my help is my business." "Normally, yes. But when that woman is a known criminal, she's not a criminal. Who defrauded an entire town and may have been involved in murder, it becomes everyone's business." Vivian's voice carried across the room, playing to the audience. "We have a responsibility to protect this community." "That's a lie," Rowan said flatly. "Evelyn didn't defraud anyone. She was the victim." "According to her. Do you have proof?" "Do you have proof she's guilty?" Vivian pulled a paper from her pocket, unfolding it with theatrical precision. "This is a telegram from the sheriff in Evelyn Mercer's hometown. It confirms she was engaged to Thomas Whitmore. It confirms her family lost their savings, and it confirms that after Whitmore disappeared, Evelyn became the primary suspect in his con. Suspect, not guilty. She fled before she could be questioned properly. That suggests guilt. That suggests she was being blamed for something she didn't do." Rowan moved closer to the front of the room. "And even if she was involved, which she wasn't, what does that have to do with my ranch?" "Everything." Vivian's expression turned sympathetic, which was somehow worse than her anger. "Rowan, I know you're lonely, I know you're struggling, but this woman is using you. Can't you see that? She shows up out of nowhere, convinces you your ranch is being poisoned, probably planning to blackmail you or steal what little you have left. She's not stealing anything. How do you know? What do you really know about her except what she's told you?" The room murmured agreement. People nodded. The sheriff shifted his weight, hand resting on his gun belt. Rowan looked around at these people, his neighbors supposedly, and saw nothing but suspicion and judgment. They'd already decided Evelyn was guilty. Already decided he was a fool for helping her, just like they'd decided Martha was too weak. Just like they'd decided his ranch was failing because he deserved it. "You want to know what I know?" Rowan's voice cut through the murmuring. "I know Evelyn Mercer diagnosed a poisoning that 3 veterinarians missed. I know she's been helping me document contamination from the Copper Ridge mine. And I know the only reason any of you care about who's on my ranch is because it serves Vivian's interests." Vivian's mask slipped for just a second. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Rowan turned to face the room. "This meeting isn't about protecting the community. It's about pressuring me to sell my land. Well, here's my answer. I'm not selling. Not to the railroad, not to you, not to anyone. You're making a mistake, Vivian said coldly. That's my right. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're harboring a criminal, making wild accusations about contamination you can't prove, and becoming a liability to everyone around you. I have proof, water samples, photographs, documentation. Convenient, all prepared by the woman you're defending. Vivian shook her head, playing to the crowd. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's manipulated you into believing lies. The mind drainage is real. Maybe, but how do we know you didn't contaminate those samples yourself? How do we know this isn't an elaborate fraud designed to extort money from the railroad company? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Rowan saw people nodding, accepting Vivian's version because it was easier than questioning their own complicity. You're unbelievable, Rowan said quietly. I'm practical. Vivian stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. Last chance, Rowan. Sell me the ranch. Walk away with something instead of nothing. Because if you don't, I will destroy you. And your little criminal friend won't be able to save you. Rowan stared into her cold blue eyes and saw the truth. She'd already won. The sheriff wouldn't help. The town wouldn't help. Even if Rowan's evidence was perfect, nobody with power would care. Because Vivian Voss had money. And money made truth irrelevant. But Rowan had survived 3 years of hell by being too stubborn to quit. He wasn't about to start now. Do your worst, he said. Vivian smiled. I will. Rowan turned and walked out, feeling every eye in the room on his back. He didn't stop until he was back on his horse, riding hard for the ranch. When he got there, Evelyn was waiting on the porch, rifle across her lap. Well? She asked. We're in trouble, Rowan said. Real trouble. What else is new? Despite everything, he almost laughed. Fair point. They sat together in the fading light, watching the horizon. Somewhere out there, Vivian Voss was planning her next move, and whatever it was, it would be designed to break them. But Rowan had faced impossible odds before. And he was still here. So was Evelyn. Maybe that was enough. The cattle drive started 3 days later, and it was a disaster from the beginning. Rowan had no choice. With the water contaminated and no money to drill a new well, the only option was to move the herd 15 miles north to clean grazing land near the Sweetwater River. It meant abandoning the ranch temporarily, leaving everything unguarded, and trusting that Vivian wouldn't burn it to the ground while he was gone. But cattle couldn't survive on poisoned water, so they moved. Evelyn insisted on coming despite her ribs still healing. Rowan tried to argue, but she shut him down fast. You need every hand you can get, she'd said, already saddling her horse. And I'm not staying here alone waiting for Vivian's people to show up. She had a point. So now here they were, Rowan, Evelyn, and 2 ranch hands he'd managed to hire for almost nothing. The hands were brothers, Jack and Samuel Porter, both in their early 20s and desperate enough for work that they didn't ask questions about the woman in men's clothing riding alongside them. The cattle moved slow, reluctant, sensing something wrong. 23 head didn't sound like much, but when half of them were sick and the other half were stubborn, it felt like 100. Keep them tight, Rowan called out, circling the herd on his horse. Don't let any strays break off. Yes, sir, Jack called back, though he looked exhausted already and they'd only been moving for 2 hours. Evelyn rode near the back, watching the weaker animals struggle. She'd wrapped her ribs tight and borrowed some of Rowan's old work clothes, canvas pants and a worn shirt that hung loose on her frame. With her hair tied back and her face still bruised, she looked like someone who'd been through a war, which Rowan supposed she had. That spotted heifer's limping, Evelyn said, pulling up beside him. Front left leg. Rowan squinted at the animal she indicated. Sure enough, the heifer was favoring one leg. Probably stepped wrong. She'll work it out. Or she'll go lame and we'll have to put her down. You always this optimistic? I'm realistic. There's a difference. Rowan bit back a response because she was right. Again. The woman had an irritating habit of being right. They pushed on through the morning, the sun climbing higher and meaner. Wyoming in late summer was unforgiving, dry heat that sucked the moisture from your lungs and turned the grassland brittle. The cattle kicked up dust with every step, coating everything in a fine brown powder. Around noon, Samuel rode up looking worried. Mr. Cade, we got a problem. Course we do. What is it? Creek up ahead's dried up. The one we were planning to water the herd at. Rowan swore under his breath. That creek was supposed to be their halfway point, the place where the cattle could drink and rest before the final push to Sweetwater. Without it, they'd have to keep moving in the heat with no water. How far to the next source? Rowan asked. 6 miles? Maybe 7? The cattle were already struggling. 6 more miles without water would kill at least a few of them. But stopping here meant watching them suffer with no relief. We keep moving, Rowan decided. Push them hard. The sooner we get to water, the better. Samuel nodded and rode off to tell his brother. Evelyn stayed quiet, but Rowan could feel her judgment. Say it, he told her. Say what? Whatever you're thinking. She adjusted her grip on the reins, eyes still on the herd. I'm thinking you're gambling with animals that are already sick. I'm thinking if you lose more than 3 head, you won't have enough cattle left to make this worth it. You got a better plan? No, but that doesn't make yours good. Rowan wanted to snap at her, but the truth was she was right. This whole operation was a desperate gamble held together with hope and stupidity. If he'd had money, he could have hauled water in barrels. If he'd had more hands, he could have split the herd. If he'd had options, he wouldn't be here at all. But he didn't have options. He had dust, dying cattle, and a woman who kept pointing out all the ways this could go wrong. Just keep them moving, he said tiredly. They pushed on into the afternoon. The heat got worse. 2 calves started stumbling, too weak to keep pace. Evelyn dismounted despite her injuries and walked beside them, murmuring in that strange way she had. Half words, half sounds. And somehow the calves steadied, kept moving. Rowan watched her and felt something shift in his chest. Gratitude, maybe. Or respect. Or something he didn't want to name yet. By the time they reached the next creek, the sun was setting and the cattle were half dead from exhaustion. But the water was clean and cold, and the animals drank like they'd never seen liquid before. Rowan slid off his horse and stood ankle-deep in the creek, letting the cool water soak through his boots. Every muscle in his body ached, his head pounded from the heat and stress. But they'd made it. Evelyn waded in beside him, cupping water in her hands and drinking. Her face was flushed from sun and exertion, her lips cracked. We lost 2 calves, she said quietly. I know. Could have been worse. Yeah. They stood there in the fading light, 2 people who'd somehow survived another impossible day. Around them, the cattle drank and settled. Jack and Samuel were setting up camp on the bank, building a fire for coffee and beans. You did good today, Rowan said. Evelyn looked at him, surprised. I barely did anything. You kept those calves moving, spotted the lame heifer before she caused a stampede, and you didn't complain once. Complaining doesn't fix problems. Most people don't see it that way. She shrugged, looking back at the water. Most people haven't had to survive the way I have. There was a story there, Rowan knew, more than what she'd already told him. But he didn't push. Some wounds needed time before they could be touched. Get some rest, he said instead. Tomorrow's worse. How comforting. Despite everything, Rowan almost smiled. They made camp under a sky full of stars that felt close enough to touch. The fire crackled and popped, throwing shadows across the prairie. Jack played a harmonica, badly, while Samuel cooked beans that tasted like metal and dirt. Evelyn sat apart from the men, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the fire with that distant look she got sometimes, like she was somewhere else entirely. Rowan brought her a tin cup of coffee. You should eat. Not hungry. Eat anyway. You need your strength. She took the cup but didn't drink. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. Why are you doing this, really? She looked at him directly. You could sell the ranch tomorrow, take whatever money Vivian offers and start over somewhere else. Why torture yourself trying to save something that's already dying? It was a fair question, one Rowan had asked himself plenty of times over the past 3 years. Because it's mine, he said finally. My grandfather cleared this land, built the house with his own hands. My father defended it against raiders, drought, disease. My wife is buried there, and I'll be damned if I let some railroad heiress take it just because she has more money than me. That's pride talking. Maybe. But pride's all I got left. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Your wife. What was she like? Most people avoided talking about Martha, like mentioning the dead was bad luck. Rowan appreciated that Evelyn didn't. Strong, he said. Stronger than she looked. She could work dawn to dusk without complaining, could shoot better than most men, and she never once regretted marrying a stubborn rancher with nothing but dirt and dreams. She loved you. Yeah, she did. Rowan stared into the fire. And I loved her. Still do, I guess. You don't stop just because someone dies. No, Evelyn agreed quietly. You don't. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the prairie night sounds. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. The cattle shifted nervously, but stayed calm. What about you? Rowan asked. You love that man who left you? Evelyn's jaw tightened. I thought I did. But looking back, I don't think I knew him well enough to love him. I loved the idea of him, the life he promised, the escape from being ordinary. You're not ordinary. How would you know? Ordinary people don't diagnose poisoned water by touching a horse. Ordinary people don't walk 2 days through the wilderness after being beaten half to death. And ordinary people definitely don't help a stranger move dying cattle across hostile territory for no pay. Evelyn looked away, but not before Rowan saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or the dangerous beginning of hope. I'm not helping for free, she said. You're giving me shelter. Shelter and a target on your back. Vivian won't forget you're with me. I know. So why stay? She was quiet for so long Rowan thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, because I don't have anywhere else to go. And because I'm tired of running. Rowan understood that. The bone-deep exhaustion of trying to survive alone. The way isolation could kill you slower than any bullet. You're not alone anymore, he said, for whatever that's worth. Evelyn finally looked at him, and in the firelight, her eyes were bright and dangerous. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. They held each other's gaze for a heartbeat too long. Then Evelyn stood abruptly, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I'm going to check on the cattle, she said. Rowan watched her walk away into the darkness and felt something settling in his chest that hadn't been there before. Something that felt like purpose. Or maybe just the promise of not being alone. Either way, it was enough to keep going. The attack came just before dawn. Rowan woke to the sound of cattle screaming, a noise that didn't exist in nature, high-pitched and terrified. He grabbed his rifle and was on his feet before his brain fully caught up. What the hell? Jack started. Rustlers! Samuel shouted from the edge of camp. At least 6 of them! Rowan ran toward the herd, rifle raised. In the pre-dawn darkness, he could make out shapes on horseback, driving the cattle away from camp. The animals scattered in panic, bellowing and crashing through the brush. A gunshot cracked through the air. Then another. Get down! Rowan dropped behind a rock outcropping, returning fire at the shadowy riders. He couldn't see well enough to aim properly, just shot in their general direction, hoping to scare them off. It didn't work. The rustlers kept coming, whooping and firing into the air, driving the cattle into a full stampede. Where was Evelyn? Rowan's heart lurched. He scanned the chaos but couldn't see her anywhere. Another gunshot rang out, closer this time, and Rowan heard Jack cry out in pain. I'm hit! The younger Porter brother went down, clutching his shoulder. Samuel ran to him, dragging him behind cover. It's not bad. You're okay. But Jack's face was white with shock, blood spreading across his shirt. Not okay at all. Rowan fired 3 more shots, then had to reload. In those precious seconds, he saw one of the rustlers break away from the group and ride directly toward him. The man raised a pistol, took aim. Another gunshot cracked, but it came from the side, not from the rustler. The man jerked in his saddle and fell, hitting the ground hard. Evelyn stood 20 feet away, Rowan's spare rifle smoking in her hands. Her face was pale but determined, her stance solid despite her injuries. You're welcome, she called. Rowan didn't have time to respond. 3 more riders were bearing down on them, firing as they came. He grabbed Evelyn and pulled her behind the rocks just as bullets pinged off the stone. How many? She asked, breathing hard. Too many. We need to fall back. The cattle are already gone. We fall back or we die. Evelyn's face twisted with frustration, but she nodded. They retreated toward the camp, firing covering shots as they went. Samuel had gotten Jack onto a horse and was leading him away from the fight. The rustlers didn't pursue. They'd gotten what they wanted, the cattle. All 21 remaining head, scattered across the prairie and being driven away into the darkness. By the time the sun rose, the rustlers were gone. So were Rowan's cattle. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd risked, just gone. He stood in the empty camp, rifle hanging loose in his hands, staring at the trampled ground where his herd had been. 3 years of fighting to save his ranch, and he'd just lost it all in 15 minutes. "Rowan?" Evelyn's voice was soft behind him. "We need to move. Jack needs a doctor." "I know. We can track them. Find the herd." "With what? 4 people, 1 injured, against 6 armed rustlers? We'd be dead before noon." "So that's it? You're giving up?" Rowan turned to look at her. "I'm being realistic, remember? That's what you're always telling me to be." The words came out harsher than he meant them. Evelyn flinched like he'd slapped her. "Right," she said quietly. "Realistic." She walked away before he could apologize. Not that he would have known what to say. "Sorry I lost everything. Sorry you hitched your survival to a man who couldn't protect anything, not even his own cattle." Samuel approached, leading the horses. "Mr. Cade? Jack's getting worse. We really need to get him to town." Rowan nodded numbly. "Let's go." They rode back toward town in silence, a funeral procession for dreams that had died in the darkness. Jack slumped in his saddle, half conscious from blood loss. Samuel kept a steadying hand on his brother's back, and Evelyn rode apart from all of them, her face a mask that revealed nothing. Rowan had nothing left. No cattle, no hope, no plan, just empty prairie and the bitter taste of defeat. They reached town by late afternoon. The doctor, a gruff man named Harrison, who smelled like whiskey, took Jack immediately, promising he'd live but would need weeks to recover. Rowan paid him with the last of his cash, then stepped outside into the dusty street feeling hollowed out and ancient. Evelyn was waiting on the doctor's porch, arms crossed. "What now?" she asked. "Now I figure out how to tell Vivian Voss she won." "You're selling." It wasn't a question, but Rowan answered anyway. "What choice do I have? No cattle, no money, no way to operate the ranch even if I wanted to." "So you just give up, hand her everything." "What the hell else am I supposed to do, Evelyn?" His control finally snapped. "I've got nothing left. Those rustlers took the last thing keeping my ranch alive, and you know damn well who sent them." "You don't know that." "Don't I? Vivian threatens me in public, and 3 days later I get hit by professional rustlers who knew exactly where we'd be camping. That's not coincidence." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Even if she did send them, you can't prove it." "Doesn't matter. Proof or no proof, I'm finished." He started walking down the street, not sure where he was going, just away. Away from the doctor's office, away from Evelyn's disappointed face, away from the weight of his own failure. But Evelyn followed him. "Stop," she said. "Leave me alone. Stop running and listen to me." "I said—" She grabbed his arm, forcing him to turn around. Her eyes were blazing. "You told me you don't give up. You told me this ranch is worth fighting for. Was that all just talk? Or did you mean it?" "I meant it when I had something to fight with. Now I don't." "You have evidence of the poisoning. You have documentation. That's worth something." "To who?" "The sheriff won't care. The town council won't care. Nobody with power will care because they're all in Vivian's pocket. Then we find someone who isn't in her pocket." Rowan laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Like who? Some magical lawyer who works for free and takes on railroad companies for fun?" "Maybe. You're delusional. And you're a coward." The word hit like a physical blow. Rowan stared at her, anger and hurt warring in his chest. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." Evelyn stepped closer, not backing down despite the fury in his face. "You're acting like a coward. The first time things get truly hard, you fold. Just like my father did when he realized Thomas had stolen everything. Just like everyone who ever told me to give up and accept that life is unfair." "This isn't the same." "See? It's exactly the same. Powerful people, crushing powerless people, and everyone else pretending that's just how the world works." Her voice shook with emotion. "But you know what? I'm done accepting it. I'm done running. And if you want to quit, fine. Sell your ranch. Let Vivian win. But don't pretend you're doing it because you have no choice. You're doing it because you're scared." "Damn right I'm scared," Rowan's shout echoed down the empty street. "I'm scared of losing everything Martha and I built. I'm scared of dying broke and alone with nothing to show for it. And I'm scared of dragging people down with me, people like you who don't deserve the hell that comes from being associated with me. That's not your decision to make. The hell it isn't. I'm not some damsel you need to protect, Rowan. I'm a grown woman who chose to stay and fight beside you. Don't insult me by assuming I don't know the risks. They stood there in the middle of the street, two stubborn people who'd been beaten down by life and still refused to stay down. Around them, the town moved on, people walking, horses passing, the world continuing like their personal disasters didn't matter, which they didn't. Not to anyone else, but they mattered to Rowan, and apparently they mattered to Evelyn. "What do you want from me?" Rowan asked quietly. "I want you to fight back. For real this time." Evelyn's voice softened. "I want you to stop accepting defeat before the fight is actually over." "The fight is over. I've got no cattle, no—" "So we get them back." Rowan blinked. "What?" "The cattle. We track the rustlers and we take them back." "That's insane. We have no guns, no men. We have 2 working rifles and 3 people. That's enough." "To do what? Storm their camp and hope they don't shoot us?" "If necessary." Evelyn's expression was dead serious. "Or we find another way. Use the law. Use evidence. Use whatever advantage we can find. But we don't quit." Rowan wanted to tell her it was hopeless. Wanted to explain that heroes only existed in stories and real life was about knowing when to cut your losses. But looking at Evelyn, bruised, broken, refusing to surrender even when surrender was the sensible choice, he felt something shift inside him. Martha used to look at him like that, with absolute faith that he could handle anything if he just tried hard enough. Maybe Evelyn was right. Maybe he was being a coward, or maybe they were both fools who were about to get themselves killed. "All right," Rowan said, "we fight back." Evelyn's face transformed, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It made her look younger, hopeful, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with spirit. "Good," she said. "Now let's figure out how." They started with the sheriff, which was a mistake. Sheriff Coleman sat behind his desk like a man who'd long ago stopped caring about justice and started caring only about his paycheck. He listened to Rowan's story with dead eyes, occasionally spitting tobacco juice into a tin can. When Rowan finished, Coleman leaned back in his chair. "And you want me to do what exactly?" "Investigate. Track down the rustlers. Get my cattle back." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that I was robbed at gunpoint. One of my men got shot. Rustling happens. It's part of ranch life." "This wasn't random rustling. This was coordinated, professional." Coleman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You accusing someone specific?" "I'm saying the timing is suspicious. Right after Vivian Voss threatens me publicly, I get hit by rustlers who knew exactly where to find us." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Cade." "It's the truth." "Truth requires proof. You got any proof Miss Voss was involved?" "No, but then I suggest you keep wild theories to yourself before you get slapped with a slander lawsuit." Coleman stood, making it clear the conversation was over. "Sorry about your cattle, but unless you can show me evidence of who took them, there's nothing I can do." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. "You're not even going to investigate?" "Investigate what? Some rustlers who are probably in the next territory by now? Use your head, Cade. Even if I wanted to help, which I don't have the resources for, those cattle are gone. Best thing you can do is accept it and move on." "Move on to what?" "That's your problem, not mine." They were dismissed. Evelyn, who'd stayed quiet during the whole exchange, finally spoke as they left the sheriff's office. "He's been bought," she said flatly. "Obviously." "So what now?" Rowan thought about it. The law wouldn't help. The sheriff wouldn't help. The town wouldn't help. They were on their own, just like always. "Now we do this ourselves," he said. Over the next 2 days, they planned. Rowan called in every favor he had left, talked to ranch hands who might have seen something, bought information from drifters who lived on the edges of society. Slowly, a picture emerged. The rustlers weren't random thieves. They were professionals, hired guns who took jobs for the right price. And they'd driven Rowan's cattle to a holding area 20 miles east, waiting for someone to come claim them, waiting for Vivian. "She's going to rebrand them," Evelyn said, studying the rough map they'd drawn. "Change the marks, make them legally hers." "Can't do that without witnesses." She can if the witnesses work for her. Rowan traced the route on the map. 20 miles, through canyon country where ambushes were easy and escape was hard. It was a trap. Had to be. She wants me to come after them, he said. Probably. So if we go, we're walking into whatever she has planned. Yes. And if we don't go, she gets the cattle and we lose anyway. Also, yes. Rowan looked at Evelyn. You understand this is likely a suicide mission. I understand you're trying to scare me into staying behind. I'm trying to be realistic. Now you want to be realistic? 10 minutes ago you were ready to fight. That was before I knew we'd be riding into a canyon ambush. Evelyn stood facing him directly. Then don't go. Stay here. Sell the ranch. Live safe and defeated for the rest of your life. And you? I'm going after those cattle with or without you. That's insane. That's survival. Those rustlers have something I need. Cattle? Leverage. Her eyes were hard. If I'm going to stop running, I need power. Money. Something Vivian Voss actually cares about. Those cattle are worth enough to hire a lawyer, to fight back properly, and I'm not letting that chance slip away just because it's dangerous. Rowan stared at her. This woman who'd shown up dying in his barn 2 weeks ago was now planning to ride into hostile territory against professional killers for a herd of cattle that weren't even hers. She was either the bravest person he'd ever met or the most damaged, probably both. All right, Rowan said finally, we go together, but we do this smart. No heroics, no last stands. We get the cattle and we get out. Agreed? Agreed. They shook on it, knowing they were both lying. Because when the shooting started, and it would start, there would be no smart way out, just survival or death. And either way, at least they'd go down fighting. They rode out at dawn with Samuel Porter, who refused to stay behind despite his brother still recovering in town. 3 riders against however many guns Vivian had waiting in that canyon. The math didn't work in their favor, but then again, nothing about Rowan's life had worked in his favor for 3 years. The canyon country rose before them like broken teeth. Red rock formations jutting up from the earth, narrow passages that twisted and turned, perfect places for men to hide and wait. Rowan had avoided this territory for good reason. Too many ways to die out here. We should split up, Samuel suggested as they approached the first canyon entrance. Cover more ground. That's how you get picked off one by one, Rowan said. We stay together. Then they see us coming. They already know we're coming. This whole thing is a setup. Evelyn had been quiet most of the ride, scanning the ridgeline with eyes that missed nothing. Now she spoke. There. She pointed to a thin trail of dust rising in the distance. Riders, at least 4. Could be our rustlers, Samuel said. Could be more of Vivian's people, Rowan countered. Either way, we need to be smart about this. But smart went out the window 10 minutes later when they rounded a bend and found themselves staring down the barrels of 6 rifles. The rustlers had set up a blockade across the narrowest part of the canyon, rocks piled to form cover, men positioned behind them with clear lines of fire. In the corral behind them, Rowan could see his cattle, penned and marked with fresh brands that weren't his. That's far enough, called a man from behind the rocks. He was older, weathered, with a scar running down his left cheek. You Cade? I am. Figured you'd show up eventually. Miss Voss said you were too stubborn to let this go. Those are my cattle. Not anymore. The scarred man grinned. We got papers saying we bought them legal. You got a bill of sale proving otherwise? I've got a bullet that says you're a thief. That's so. The man's grin widened. Well, we got 6 rifles say you're outnumbered. So how about you turn around, ride back to your dying ranch, and forget you ever came here? Rowan's hand moved toward his rifle. Evelyn's hand shot out, gripping his wrist hard enough to hurt. Don't, she whispered. Not yet. She was right. Drawing now meant dying. They needed another play. Evelyn raised her voice, addressing the rustlers directly. How much is Vivian paying you? The scarred man's smile faltered slightly. Don't know what you're talking about, lady. Sure you do. Vivian Voss hired you to steal these cattle and hold them until she could claim them. I'm guessing she's paying you well. But here's the thing, she's setting you up. That's a lie. Is it? Because right now we know you're here. We know where the cattle are, and if we know, other people will know. The sheriff, the territory marshal. And when they come asking questions, who do you think Vivian will sacrifice? You think she'll protect hired guns over her own reputation? The scarred man's eyes narrowed. You trying to scare us? I'm trying to give you a way out. Let us take the cattle and disappear. Vivian doesn't need to know you let them go. Tell her we ambushed you, overpowered you. She won't care as long as she doesn't look bad. For a moment, Rowan thought it might actually work. The rustlers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Then a new voice cut through the canyon. How touching. Vivian Voss rode into view on a pristine white horse, flanked by 2 more armed men. She looked completely out of place in the rough canyon, dressed too fine, posture too perfect. But her eyes were cold as winter. Evelyn Mercer, Vivian said, stopping her horse 20 feet from Rowan's group. The notorious con artist. I was wondering when you'd show your face. I'm not a con artist. No? Then what do you call seducing a grieving widower and convincing him to wage war against me? Vivian's smile was poison. That seems like a con to me. Nobody seduced anyone, Rowan said, and the only one waging war is you. I'm defending my interests. There's a difference. Vivian's gaze swept over them dismissively. You rode all this way for cattle you can't afford to keep. That's pathetic even by your standards, Rowan. Those cattle are legally mine. Are they? Because I have documentation saying they were sold to pay off your debts. All very official, all very legal. That's forged. Prove it. Vivian gestured to the rustlers. These men witnessed the sale. They'll testify in court if needed. Meanwhile, you have nothing but accusations and desperation. She was right. Rowan knew she was right. Even if he could prove the documents were forged, by the time any legal process played out, the cattle would be gone, and he'd be bankrupt from lawyer fees. Vivian had won. Again. Just give up, Rowan, Vivian said, almost gently. Sell me the ranch. I'll pay fair market value. More than it's worth, honestly. You can walk away with dignity instead of dying broke in some canyon over livestock. I'd rather die broke than give you the satisfaction. How noble and how stupid. Vivian's expression hardened. Last chance. Walk away now, or I'll have my men remove you. Violently, if necessary. Rowan's hand tightened on his rifle. The math was still wrong. 3 against 8, no cover, no advantage. But maybe dying on his feet was better than living on his knees. Then Evelyn did something unexpected. She dismounted and walked forward, hands raised toward Vivian. Evelyn, don't, Rowan started. Wait. She kept walking until she stood directly in front of Vivian's horse, looking up at the woman who'd orchestrated all of this. You want to destroy him because he rejected you. Vivian's face tightened. I want his land for legitimate business purposes. No. You want revenge because he chose a dead wife's memory over you, and you're using me as an excuse to punish him. Evelyn's voice was steady, clear. But here's what you don't understand. I'm not some helpless victim you can manipulate. I know exactly what you're doing, and I'm not going to let you hide behind respectability while you destroy innocent people. You? Vivian laughed. You're going to stop me? The woman who couldn't even stop a con man from ruining her life? That's right, because I learned something from being ruined. Evelyn stepped closer, and something in her posture made Vivian's horse shift nervously. I learned that people like you only have power because people like me are too scared to fight back. But I'm done being scared. How inspiring and completely meaningless. Vivian gestured to her men. Remove her. Violently. The hired guns moved forward. Rowan raised his rifle, Samuel did the same, and everything balanced on the edge of violence. A gunshot cracked across the canyon, but it didn't come from any of them. Sheriff Coleman rode into view from the opposite end of the canyon, rifle smoking, flanked by 3 deputies and a woman Rowan had never seen before. The woman was Chinese, dressed in city clothes, carrying a leather satchel that marked her as someone official. That's far enough, Coleman called out. Everyone lowers their weapons. Now! Vivian's face went white. Sheriff, what are you doing here? My job! For once! Coleman dismounted, looking disgusted with himself. Seems I had a visit from attorney Margaret Chen this morning. She had some real interesting questions about forged cattle sales and hired rustlers. Questions I couldn't ignore. The woman, Margaret Chen, stepped forward. She was small, sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that commanded attention despite her size. Miss Voss, I'm here representing Mr. Cade in a civil matter regarding theft and fraud. I'd like to see your documentation proving ownership of those cattle." Vivian's control slipped for just a second, panic flashing across her perfect face. "I don't have to show you anything. Actually, you do. Unless you want me to file criminal charges right now." Margaret's voice was crisp, professional. "I have testimony from 3 witnesses who saw your men steal Mr. Cade's cattle. I have documentation of the poisoned water on his property, which points to deliberate sabotage. And I have records of payments from your father's company to known criminals. So I'll ask again, show me your proof of ownership." The canyon went silent except for wind whistling through the rocks. Vivian looked at her hired guns, looked at the sheriff, looked at Margaret Chen standing there with the law finally on her side instead of Vivian's, and for the first time in her life, Vivian Voss had no move left to make. "This isn't over," she said finally. "Yes," Margaret replied. "It is." What happened next felt surreal. The sheriff arrested 4 of the rustlers, including the scarred man who'd led them. The others scattered, running rather than facing charges. Vivian tried to leave, but Margaret blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere until we sort this out in court," Margaret said. "You can't hold me. I haven't been charged with anything. Not yet. But fleeing while under investigation would look very bad, especially with the territorial governor asking questions about your family's business practices." Vivian's face went from white to red. "My father will bury you for this." "He can try." Margaret didn't look remotely intimidated. "But I've buried bigger men than him." Rowan watched all of this happening and couldn't quite believe it. An hour ago, he'd been ready to die in this canyon. Now Vivian was the one trapped, and his cattle were being released back to him. Evelyn appeared beside him, looking equally stunned. "Who is she?" "No idea." As if hearing them, Margaret turned and approached. Up close, she was younger than Rowan first thought, maybe 35, with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by human cruelty. "Mr. Cade," she said, extending her hand. "Margaret Chen. I'm an attorney out of Denver, specializing in land disputes and corporate fraud." Rowan shook her hand, confused. "I didn't hire you." "I know. I hired myself." She smiled slightly. "I've been investigating the Voss family's business practices for 6 months. Multiple ranchers across 3 territories all reporting similar problems. Poisoned water, mysterious livestock deaths, pressure to sell, all connected to Voss Railroad expansion. When I heard about your situation, I knew it was the break I needed." "So we're what? Your test case?" "Your victim's seeking justice. I'm the lawyer who can get it for you." Margaret's expression turned serious. "But I need to be honest, this fight isn't over. What happened today buys you time, nothing more. Vivian will regroup, her father will bring pressure. They'll try to make this go away through money and influence." "So we're back where we started." "No, because now you have representation, documentation, witnesses willing to testify, and most importantly, you have me." She looked at Evelyn. "Both of you." Evelyn had been quiet, watching Margaret with something like wonder. Now she spoke. "Why are you helping us?" "Because I'm tired of watching powerful people crush everyone beneath them and call it progress. And because cases like this, when we actually win, they change things. They make other ranchers believe they can fight back. They make other attorneys take these cases seriously." Margaret's eyes glinted. "Plus, I really hate railroad heiresses who think money makes them untouchable." Despite everything, Rowan almost laughed. "So what happens now?" "Now we build a case. Gather evidence. Prepare for court." Margaret pulled papers from her satchel. "I need statements from both of you. Everything that's happened. Every interaction with Vivian. Every suspicious incident. Every piece of proof you have about the contamination." "We documented the mine drainage," Evelyn said. "Photos, water samples, maps showing the flow path." Margaret's eyes lit up. "Perfect. That's exactly what I need." They spent the rest of the day there in the canyon, giving statements while the sheriff processed the arrested rustlers and Rowan's cattle were rounded up. It was methodical, exhausting work. But for the first time in years, Rowan felt like maybe the system could actually work. As the sun started setting, Margaret packed up her materials and prepared to ride back to town. Before she left, she pulled Rowan aside. "I need to warn you," she said quietly. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. Vivian's humiliated. Her father's business is threatened. They're going to come at you with everything they have. legal attacks, character assassination, possibly physical threats. We can handle it. Can you? Margaret glanced at Evelyn, who was helping Samuel with the cattle. Because that woman is going to be their primary target. They'll dig into her past, find every ugly detail about Thomas Whitmore and the con, use it to paint her as a criminal who manipulated you. They'll destroy her reputation to destroy your case. Rowan's jaw tightened. Let them try. I'm serious, Mr. Cade. Evelyn's presence in your life is a vulnerability. The smart move would be to distance yourself from her until the trial is over. That's not happening. Even if it costs you the case? Even then. Margaret studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but when they come for her, and they will, don't say I didn't warn you. She rode off, leaving Rowan standing in the canyon twilight, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Evelyn approached as he stood there. What did she say? That Vivian's going to target you, use your past against us. I figured. Evelyn didn't look surprised. You want me to leave? No? You should. Margaret's right. I'm a liability. My reputation, my history with Thomas, all of it makes your case weaker. I don't care. You should care. This is your ranch, your life. Don't throw it away because you feel sorry for me. Rowan turned to face her fully. Is that what you think this is? Pity? What else would it be? How about partnership? How about two people who've been beaten down deciding to stand back up together? He stepped closer. You're not a liability, Evelyn. You're the reason we got this far. The reason we found the contamination. The reason we didn't give up. That doesn't change the facts. I'm still a woman with a scandalous past helping a widowed rancher. People will assume the worst. People have been assuming the worst about me for 3 years. I stopped caring what they think a long time ago. Well, I care. Her voice cracked slightly. I care that you're risking everything for someone who can't give you anything in return. You gave me hope. That's worth more than cattle. Evelyn looked away, blinking hard. You barely know me. I know you touch dying horses and they live. I know you walked through hell and came out fighting. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met. Rowan reached out, gently turning her face back toward him. And I know that whatever Vivian throws at us, we handle it together. No running, no sacrificing yourself to protect me. Together. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. You're a fool. Probably. We're going to lose. Maybe. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with fighting beside you. Win or lose. He meant it. For the first time since Martha died, Rowan meant something that had nothing to do with the ranch or revenge or survival. Just simple truth. Evelyn stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Then slowly, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Not a kiss, not romance, just exhaustion and trust and two broken people holding each other up. Rowan wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with silent tears. Neither of them spoke. Words would have ruined it. Behind them, Samuel cleared his throat awkwardly. Boss? Cattle are ready to move. Rowan released Evelyn slowly. She stepped back, wiping her eyes roughly with her sleeve. Right, she said, voice thick. Let's get them home. They rode back through the darkness, driving the cattle ahead of them. It took twice as long as it should have. The animals were skittish, exhausted, reluctant to move, but eventually they made it back to the ranch as dawn broke. Rowan had never been so happy to see his broken-down barn and dying grassland. Evelyn helped him pen the cattle, then collapsed on the porch steps, too tired to make it inside. Rowan sat beside her, watching the sun rise over land that was still his. At least for now. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? Staying, fighting, not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, you did the same for me. That's different. How? Because you actually matter. The ranch is just land and animals. He stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. I'm what? Rowan looked at her, this woman who'd stumbled into his barn dying and somehow became the reason he kept breathing. You're family. That's what you are. More tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks, but she was smiling. You're an idiot. So you keep saying. A stubborn, impossible idiot. Yeah, I'm glad I found your barn. Me too. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, two people who'd survived another day in a war they still might lose. But for now, for this moment, they were alive and together, and that was enough. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. Then Vivian struck back with everything she had. It started with a notice delivered by a well-dressed man who worked for the territorial court. Evelyn was being charged with fraud, theft, and conspiracy. There would be a trial. She would need to appear. Margaret arrived within hours, face grim. She's going nuclear. Vivian contacted officials in your hometown, Evelyn, got them to file formal charges. Claims you conspired with Thomas Whitmore to defraud investors, then fled to avoid prosecution. That's a lie, Evelyn said, but her voice shook. I know. But it's a lie backed by testimony from people who were defrauded. They want someone to blame, and you're convenient. Margaret spread papers across the kitchen table. We can fight this, but it's going to be brutal. They'll drag every mistake you've ever made into public view, question your character, paint you as a manipulative criminal. How do we stop it? We don't. We endure it, and we prove them wrong. Rowan slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. Evelyn's the victim here. The law doesn't care about that. It cares about evidence and testimony. Margaret looked at Evelyn. Can you handle this? Having your entire life examined? Being called a liar and worse in front of the whole territory? Evelyn's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Yes. You sure? Because once this starts, there's no backing out. They'll destroy you if they can. They already destroyed me once. I survived. Evelyn met Margaret's eyes, and this time I have people on my side. That makes all the difference. Margaret nodded slowly. All right, then we prepare. The trial starts in 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were hell. Margaret drilled Evelyn on her testimony, preparing her for every possible attack. Rowan gave statements, gathered witnesses, did everything he could to support her case. But it wasn't enough. The town turned against them. Rumors spread like wildfire. Evelyn was a con artist. Rowan was being manipulated. They were both criminals working together to defraud the railroad. People who'd known Rowan for years crossed the street to avoid him. Someone painted thieves on the barn in red paint. Someone else left a dead crow on the porch with a note. Leave while you can. Through it all, Evelyn stayed. Worked the ranch, helped Rowan with the cattle, acted like the hatred didn't touch her. But Rowan saw it eating at her. Saw the way she flinched at loud voices. The way she stopped sleeping. The way she'd stand at the window staring at nothing, lost in whatever dark thoughts haunted her. You don't have to do this, he told her one night. You could leave. Start over somewhere else. And prove them right? That I'm a coward who runs when things get hard? Evelyn shook her head. No, I'm done running. Even if it destroys you, I've been destroyed before. I know how to rebuild. The night before the trial, Rowan found her in the barn, sitting beside the horse stalls in the dark. He sat down next to her without speaking. After a while, Evelyn said, I'm scared. I know. Not of losing. I'm scared of what they'll say about me, the things that are true. Her voice was barely audible. I was stupid to trust Thomas. Stupid to believe someone like him could actually love someone like me. And people died because of my stupidity. My father died because I convinced him to invest everything. That's not your fault, isn't it? I vouched for Thomas. Told my father he was trustworthy. If I hadn't been so desperate to escape my ordinary life, none of it would have happened. You were a victim. Thomas manipulated you. I let myself be manipulated. That's the part I can't forgive. She looked at Rowan with eyes full of old pain. Tomorrow they're going to put me on trial and call me a criminal, and part of me thinks they're right, that I deserve this. Rowan grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. You're not a criminal. You're a survivor. Every single person who hurt you, Thomas, the town, the men who beat you, they're the criminals. Not you. Never you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've watched you for weeks now, seen how you handle yourself, how you treat people, how you fight. His grip tightened. You're the best person I know, Evelyn. And if they can't see that, they're the fools. Evelyn's face crumpled. She leaned into him, sobbing against his chest while Rowan held her, and wished he could kill everyone who'd ever made her doubt herself. We're going to win, he promised. I don't care what it takes. We're going to win." But as he said it, holding a broken woman in a dark barn, Rowan wondered if he was lying, because the truth was, he had no idea if they could win, and tomorrow they'd find out. The courtroom smelled like old wood and judgment. Every seat was filled. Townspeople who'd come to watch the spectacle, reporters from 3 territories, and enough curious onlookers that the bailiff had to turn people away at the door. Rowan sat in the front row behind Margaret's table, watching Evelyn sit rigid beside the attorney, her face pale, but composed. Vivian Voss sat across the aisle with her own team of lawyers. 3 of them, all expensive suits and cold eyes. She caught Rowan looking and smiled. Not triumphant. Worse. Pitying, like she'd already won and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. Judge Harrison Blackwell entered, and the room fell silent. Blackwell was old territory stock, 70 if he was a day, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen every type of frontier cruelty. Fair, people said. Harsh, but fair. Rowan hoped to hell that was true. "This court is now in session," Blackwell announced, settling into his chair with a grunt. "Case of the Territory versus Evelyn Mercer, charges of fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. Prosecution, you may begin." The lead prosecutor was a man named Harrison Gaines, no relation to the judge, but plenty of relation to Vivian's father's money. He stood with the practiced grace of someone who'd won 100 cases and expected to win 100 more. "Your Honor, the prosecution will prove that Miss Evelyn Mercer knowingly and deliberately participated in a scheme to defraud innocent citizens of their life savings, that she aided and abetted Thomas Whitmore in his criminal enterprise, and that when the scheme collapsed, she fled to avoid prosecution." Gaines paced in front of the jury. 12 men, all local, all looking at Evelyn like she was something diseased. "We will show that Miss Mercer used her relationship with Mr. Whitmore to gain the trust of her community, that she vouched for his character and encouraged investment. And when Mr. Whitmore disappeared with the money, she conveniently played the victim to avoid suspicion." He gestured to Evelyn with theatrical disgust. "This woman is not a victim. She is a criminal who has spent months evading justice. And now she seeks to use another man, Mr. Rowan Cade, as her next mark, her next shield against the consequences of her actions." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. Margaret touched his arm, a silent warning to stay calm. Gaines continued for another 10 minutes, painting Evelyn as a manipulative seductress who preyed on vulnerable men. By the time he finished, half the courtroom was nodding along. Then it was Margaret's turn. She stood slowly, gathering her papers with deliberate care. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled, deadly. "Your Honor, the defense will prove that Evelyn Mercer is exactly what she claims to be, a victim of a con man who destroyed her family and her life. We will show that she had no knowledge of Thomas Whitmore's criminal activities, that she lost everything, her father, her reputation, her home, because she trusted the wrong person." Margaret walked to the jury box, making eye contact with each man. "The prosecution wants you to believe that Miss Mercer is a criminal mastermind, but the evidence will show she's a young woman who made the mistake of falling in love with a liar, a mistake that cost her everything. And when her community turned against her, when they blamed her for crimes she didn't commit, she did what any innocent person would do. She ran, because staying meant dying." She turned to face Gaines. "The real criminal here is Thomas Whitmore, who is conveniently absent from this courtroom. And the real injustice is that we're prosecuting his victim while he walks free with stolen money." Margaret sat down. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Judge Blackwell banged his gavel once, restoring silence. "Prosecution may call its first witness." Gaines called 3 people from Evelyn's hometown. All of them had lost money to Thomas. All of them testified that Evelyn had encouraged them to invest, that she'd seemed completely devoted to Thomas, that her grief after he left seemed staged. "She was always too interested in his business dealings," one woman testified, her face pinched with bitterness. "Always asking questions about money and investments. It wasn't natural for a young girl." "Did Miss Mercer directly ask you to invest?" Margaret asked on cross-examination. "Well, no, but she spoke highly of Thomas." "That's not what I asked. Did she directly solicit your money?" "She said Thomas was trustworthy." "Yes or no? Did Evelyn Mercer ask you for money?" The woman's mouth tightened. "No, but..." "Thank you. No further questions." It went like that for hours. The prosecution presented testimony that sounded damning until Margaret picked it apart on cross-examination. Yes, Evelyn had vouched for Thomas. Yes, she'd been engaged to him. But no, she'd never directly solicited investments. No, she'd never handled money. No, she'd had no access to Thomas's business records. By the time they broke for the day, the case looked weaker. Not good, but weaker. Rowan caught up with Evelyn outside the courthouse as reporters swarmed. She looked exhausted, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear. "You did good in there," he said. "I barely spoke." "That's why you did good. Let Margaret handle it." Evelyn looked at the crowd of townspeople watching them with hostile eyes. "They hate me, all of them." "They don't know you." "They know enough." She started walking toward the wagon. "Come on, I want to go home. Home." She'd called the ranch home. Rowan felt something warm settle in his chest at the word. They rode back in silence, exhaustion making conversation impossible. When they arrived, Samuel was waiting on the porch, looking agitated. "Boss, we got a problem." Rowan's stomach sank. "What now?" "3 more cattle dead. Found them in the south pasture this afternoon." "Dead how?" "Poisoned. Same symptoms as before." Samuel's face was grim. "Someone contaminated the water again. New source this time, not the well. The creek." Rowan felt fury and helplessness war in his chest. "When?" "Last night, probably. I checked yesterday morning, and everything was fine. While they'd been in court, someone had poisoned his water supply. Again. The timing wasn't coincidence. Evelyn was already moving toward the pasture. Show me." They found the dead cattle bloating in the afternoon heat, foam dried around their mouths. The creek nearby ran clear, but Evelyn knelt and tested the water with her fingers, then brought them to her nose. "Arsenic," she said quietly, "dissolved in the water. Not enough to see or smell, but enough to kill." "Can you be sure?" Rowan asked. "My mother taught me to recognize poisons. This is arsenic." She stood, wiping her hands on her pants. "Someone dumped it upstream, let it flow down to your water source." "Vivian." "Probably. Or someone working for her." Evelyn looked at the dead cattle with something like grief. "She's sending a message that even if we win in court, she can still destroy you." Rowan wanted to scream, or break something, or ride to the Voss estate and burn it to the ground. But violence wouldn't solve this. Violence would just give Vivian exactly what she wanted, an excuse to have him arrested or killed. "We document it," he said finally. "Photograph everything, get water samples, add it to Margaret's evidence. Will it matter?" "It has to." They spent the rest of the evening documenting the poisoning, even though both of them knew it wouldn't change the trial's outcome. Evelyn's case was about fraud, not cattle poisoning. But maybe it would prove a pattern of harassment, show the jury that Vivian was capable of anything. That night, Rowan couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch in darkness, listening to the prairie wind and wondering how much more he could lose before there was nothing left. Evelyn joined him around midnight, wrapped in a blanket. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Nope." She sat beside him on the steps. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing all this down on you. The trial, the attention, the attacks on your ranch." Her voice was heavy with guilt. "You'd be better off if I'd never stumbled into your barn." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Before me, you were just a struggling rancher. Now you're caught up in legal battles and cattle poisonings and—" "Before you, I was dying," Rowan interrupted. "Maybe not physically, but dying anyway. Going through motions. Waiting for the ranch to finally collapse, so I'd have an excuse to give up." He looked at her. "You gave me a reason to fight. That's worth more than cattle." Evelyn's eyes glistened in the darkness. "You really believe that?" "Yeah, I do." She leaned against his shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, two people holding each other up against a world that wanted them broken. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Evelyn said quietly, "thank you for believing me when nobody else would." "Always," Rowan promised. The trial resumed with the prosecution calling their star witness, Sheriff Coleman from Evelyn's hometown. He testified that Evelyn had been under investigation for fraud, that she'd fled before questioning, that her behavior suggested guilt. Margaret tore into him on cross-examination. "Sheriff Coleman, did you actually investigate Thomas Whitmore before Miss Mercer left town?" "We tried," But he was gone. That's not what I asked. Did you investigate him before he disappeared? Coleman shifted uncomfortably. There was no reason to investigate until people reported the fraud. So you had a smooth-talking stranger show up in your town, convince people to invest thousands of dollars, and you never once checked his background or credentials? He seemed legitimate. Based on what? His word? His expensive clothes? Margaret's voice sharpened. Or based on the fact that he was courting a local girl from a respectable family, which gave him credibility he hadn't earned? I suppose. You suppose that maybe you failed to do your job. And when the fraud was discovered, it was easier to blame Evelyn Mercer than admit you'd been negligent? Objection, Gaines shot to his feet. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Blackwell said. But he was looking at Coleman with new suspicion. Margaret pressed on. Did you find any evidence, any physical evidence, linking Miss Mercer to the fraud? Her testimony vouching for Whitmore, physical evidence, Sheriff, bank records, letters, money transfers, anything showing she participated in or benefited from the crime. Coleman was silent. I'll take that as a no. Margaret turned to the jury. Because there is no evidence, just assumptions and scapegoating. No further questions. The prosecution called 2 more witnesses, both equally weak. By the time they rested their case, reasonable doubt was creeping into the jury box. Rowan could see it in their faces. Uncertainty replacing certainty. Then it was the defense's turn. Margaret called Rowan first. He took the stand feeling like everyone in the courtroom was examining him for weaknesses. Mr. Cade, Margaret began, how did you meet Miss Mercer? She collapsed in my barn, beaten, bleeding, wearing a ruined wedding dress. I thought she was going to die. Did she ask you for help? No, she just showed up, like she'd walked as far as she could and then couldn't go any further. What did you do? Brought her inside, cleaned her wounds, let her recover. Rowan looked at the jury. I didn't know anything about her past. Didn't know about Thomas Whitmore or the fraud or any of it. I just knew she was hurt and needed help. Did she ever try to manipulate you? Ask for money? Attempt to con you in any way? No, she worked. Helped with the ranch. Diagnosed a poisoning that was killing my livestock. She earned her keep and then some. And when you learned about the accusations against her? I didn't believe them. Still don't. Rowan's voice was firm. I've known criminals. Real criminals. Evelyn Mercer isn't one of them. Gaines stood for cross-examination, circling like a predator. Mr. Cade, you're a widower, correct? Yes. Lonely? Margaret objected. Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's state of mind, Gaines said smoothly. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Cade. Rowan gritted his teeth. I've been alone since my wife died, yes. And Miss Mercer arrived at your ranch. Young, vulnerable, in need of a protector. Isn't it possible you're not seeing her clearly? That you want to believe she's innocent because the alternative is too painful? No. No, you're certain. I'm certain that I know manipulation when I see it. And I'm certain that a woman who works 16-hour days healing sick animals and documenting water contamination isn't running a con. Or perhaps that's exactly what a good con artist would do. Earn your trust, make herself indispensable, and then what? Rowan leaned forward. She hasn't asked me for anything, hasn't taken anything. Hell, she's tried to leave multiple times and I convinced her to stay. If she's a con artist, she's terrible at it. A few people in the gallery laughed. Judge Blackwell gavelled them silent, but Gaines looked annoyed. No further questions, he said curtly. Margaret called several more witnesses. Ranch hands who testified to Evelyn's character, the veterinarian who admitted the poisoning diagnosis was correct, even Sheriff Coleman from Rowan's territory, who reluctantly confirmed the cattle theft and Vivian's involvement. Then, finally, Margaret called Evelyn herself. The courtroom went silent as Evelyn took the stand. She looked small up there, fragile, but her voice was steady as she swore to tell the truth. Margaret started gentle. Miss Mercer, tell us about Thomas Whitmore. How did you meet him? He came to our town 6 months before the wedding. Charming, well-dressed. Said he was an entrepreneur looking to invest in frontier communities. Evelyn's voice was flat, reciting facts. He attended church, made friends, seemed genuinely interested in helping people. And you fell in love with him. I thought I did. Now I think I was in love with the idea of escape, of being special to someone, of having a life bigger than what I was born into. Did you know about his criminal activities? No. He never discussed business with me beyond vague mentions of investments and opportunities. I thought he was successful. Did you encourage people to invest with him? I told people he seemed trustworthy, that he made me happy, but I never asked anyone for money, never even knew specific amounts being invested. And when he disappeared, Evelyn's composure cracked slightly. I was standing at the altar waiting for him. The church was full. My father was so proud. And Thomas just never came. We found out later that morning that he'd emptied his accounts and left town. How did the community react? At first they were sympathetic, but as people realized how much money was gone, they started looking for someone to blame. And I was convenient. Why? Because I'd vouched for him, because I was engaged to him, and because admitting they'd been fooled by a stranger was harder than believing I'd helped fool them. Evelyn looked at the jury. It was easier to hate me than face their own poor judgment. Margaret let that sink in. What happened after the accusations started? My father had a heart attack. The stress killed him. After the funeral, people started threatening me. Someone threw rocks through my window, left dead animals on my porch, wrote horrible things on my door. Her voice shook. The sheriff told me if I didn't like it, I should leave. So I did. And the men who beat you? 3 men from town followed me when I left. Said they wanted their money back. When I couldn't give it to them, when I explained I had nothing, they decided to take payment another way. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Gaines looked uncomfortable. How did you escape? Margaret asked gently. I fought back. Harder than they expected. I ran, kept running until I couldn't anymore. And then I found Mr. Cade's ranch. Miss Mercer, did you commit fraud? No. Did you help Thomas Whitmore steal money? No. Did you know he was a criminal? Not until he was gone and it was too late. Margaret nodded. Thank you. No further questions. Gaines approached for cross-examination, and Rowan could see him recalculating his strategy. Going too hard on Evelyn now would make him look cruel, but going soft would make the prosecution look weak. Miss Mercer, he began carefully, you admit you vouched for Mr. Whitmore's character. Yes. Encouraged people to trust him. I said he seemed trustworthy. Yes. And you benefited from your relationship with him. Nice gifts, attention, the prospect of marriage to a wealthy man. I thought I was in a genuine relationship. That's not the same as benefiting from fraud. But you did benefit. I lost my father, my home, my reputation. I was beaten and left for dead. Evelyn's voice turned hard. If that's benefiting, I'd hate to see what punishment looks like. Several jurors nodded. Gaines's jaw tightened. You fled rather than face investigation. I fled to avoid being murdered. There's a difference. Yet you ended up at another man's ranch, a wealthy rancher. Some might say you found another mark. Rowan Cade's ranch is failing. His cattle were dying. He had no money and no prospects. If I was looking for a mark, I chose poorly. More stifled laughter from the gallery. Judge Blackwell looked amused despite himself. Gaines tried several more angles, but Evelyn deflected each one with brutal honesty. She wasn't performing innocence. She was simply telling the truth, and the truth was devastating to the prosecution's narrative. Finally, Gaines gave up. No further questions. As Evelyn stepped down, Rowan saw something he'd never seen before. Vivian Voss looking worried. Closing arguments came next. Gaines gave a passionate speech about holding criminals accountable, about not being fooled by tears and pretty stories, but his heart wasn't in it. The case was slipping away. Margaret's closing was simple and brutal. The prosecution wants you to convict Evelyn Mercer because it's easier than admitting they have no real criminal to punish. Thomas Whitmore is gone. The money is gone. And rather than face that failure, they're trying to destroy a woman whose only crime was trusting the wrong person. She paused, letting that sink in. Every single person in this courtroom has trusted someone who betrayed them. Every single one of us has made a mistake in judgment. The difference is that when you made that mistake, you weren't beaten, blamed, and prosecuted for it. Margaret walked to the jury box. Evelyn Mercer is not a criminal. She's a survivor. And if you convict her today, you're not serving justice. You're just finishing what the mob started when they drove her from her home. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Blackwell sent the jury to deliberate. The wait was agony. Rowan paced outside the courthouse while Evelyn sat on a bench, staring at nothing. Margaret reviewed her notes, preparing for every possible outcome. 3 hours passed. Then 4. Finally, the bailiff emerged. "Jury's back." They filed into the courtroom, taking their seats. Rowan tried to read their faces, but couldn't. They looked tired, uncertain, human. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Blackwell asked. The foreman stood, an older rancher Rowan vaguely recognized. "We have, Your Honor." "What say you?" "On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom erupted. Rowan felt his knees nearly give out. Beside him, Evelyn made a sound, half sob, half laugh, and buried her face in her hands. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit theft," the foreman continued, "we find the defendant not guilty." More chaos. Judge Blackwell banged his gavel repeatedly, restoring order. "The defendant is cleared of all charges," he declared. "Miss Mercer, you are free to go." Margaret was already on her feet, gathering papers. But before she could speak, the judge continued. "However, I am ordering a formal investigation into the business practices of Voss Railroad Company based on evidence presented during this trial. If even half of what was suggested is true, there will be additional prosecutions." Vivian's face went white. Her lawyers immediately started whispering urgently, but the damage was done. Rowan didn't hear the rest. He was too busy watching Evelyn stand on shaking legs, tears streaming down her face, free for the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Margaret handled it professionally, giving statements about justice being served and investigations pending. Rowan and Evelyn pushed through the crowd to their wagon. As they climbed aboard, Vivian appeared from the crowd. Her perfect composure was cracking at the edges, makeup smudged, dress wrinkled. "This isn't over," she said to Rowan. Your father will be too busy defending himself to bother with me." Rowan interrupted. "You lost, Vivian. Accept it." "I never lose." "You just did." Vivian's face twisted with rage and humiliation. For a moment, Rowan thought she might actually hit him. But then Margaret appeared beside them, and Vivian's survival instincts kicked in. "Enjoy your victory," Vivian said coldly. "It won't last." She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Rowan and Evelyn standing in the chaos of their unlikely win. "Is it really over?" Evelyn asked quietly. "The trial is. The rest—" Rowan shook his head. "We'll figure it out." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the prairie gold and red. It felt different somehow, lighter, like a weight had been lifted that Rowan hadn't realized he was carrying. When they arrived, Samuel was waiting with a rare smile. "I heard. Congratulations." "Thanks," Rowan said. "How are the cattle?" "Moved them to the north pasture. Clean water source, well away from any contamination. They're doing better." Small victories. But victories nonetheless. That night, Rowan found Evelyn standing in the same spot where he'd first found her weeks ago. The barn entrance, staring out at the dark prairie. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel different. Relieved. Happy. But mostly I just feel empty." "That's normal. You've been fighting for so long you don't know what to do without the fight." "Is that how you felt when Martha died?" "Yeah, like I'd been running from grief for so long that when I finally stopped I didn't know how to just exist." Evelyn turned to face him. "What changed?" "You showed up, gave me something to fight for besides my own stubbornness." "I didn't do anything special." "You survived. That's plenty special." Rowan stepped closer. "And now you get to decide what comes next. You're free, Evelyn, actually free. No charges, no more running. You can go anywhere, do anything. And if I want to stay here?" Rowan's heart skipped. "Then you stay." "Why would you want that? I'm nothing but trouble." "Your family, that's what you are." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "And I'd like you to stay, if you want to." Evelyn's eyes searched his face, looking for lies or pity or obligation. Finding none of those things, she finally allowed herself to smile. "Yeah," she said softly. "I want to." Rowan pulled her into a hug, and for the first time since Martha died, he felt like maybe, just maybe, He could build something new from the ashes of what he'd lost. They stood there in the barn doorway, two broken people who'd somehow found each other in the darkness and decided that broken was good enough, that survival was good enough, and that together they could face whatever came next. The first week after the trial, Evelyn kept expecting something to go wrong. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced that armed men were coming, that Vivian had found a way to reverse the verdict, that the freedom was temporary and fragile as glass. But nothing happened. The days passed quiet and uneventful, filled with ranch work and healing cattle and the slow, steady rhythm of survival. Margaret stopped by on the 8th day with news. She sat at the kitchen table spreading papers while Rowan made coffee that tasted like dirt. "The investigation into Voss Railroad is moving forward," Margaret said. "Federal prosecutors are involved now. They've found evidence of fraud, bribery, and intimidation across 4 territories." "Will they actually prosecute?" Rowan asked. "They're building a case. It takes time, but yes, the Voss family is facing serious consequences." Margaret looked at Evelyn. "There's something else. The authorities in your hometown have dropped any further investigation into you, officially cleared you of suspicion." Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. "Really? Really? You're free, completely." Margaret smiled. "You could go home if you wanted. Home." The word felt strange. Evelyn had spent so long running from that place, she'd forgotten it could be anything other than a source of pain. "I don't think I want to," she said quietly. "There's nothing left for me there." "Then you start somewhere new." Margaret gathered her papers. "Which brings me to my actual reason for visiting. I need an assistant, someone good with documents, detail-oriented, willing to learn law. It doesn't pay much at first, but—" "You're offering me a job?" Evelyn interrupted. "If you're interested, I've got 6 more cases like yours lined up. People getting crushed by corporations and corrupt officials. I need help, and you've proven you can handle pressure." It was a good offer, a chance to do something meaningful, to help other people fight the same battles she'd fought. But Evelyn looked at Rowan, standing by the stove with terrible coffee in his hands, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Belonging, the dangerous, terrifying desire to put down roots. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take your time." Margaret stood to leave. "But don't take too long. The world needs more people willing to fight back." After Margaret left, Rowan and Evelyn sat in silence. The offer hung between them like unspoken questions. "You should take it," Rowan said finally. It's a good opportunity." "Maybe. You'd be good at it, helping people, fighting injustice." "I know. So why hesitate?" Evelyn traced the rim of her coffee cup. "Because I'm tired of fighting. I've been fighting my whole life. Fighting to survive, fighting to prove I'm not a criminal, fighting just to exist. And for once, I'd like to just be." "Be what?" "I don't know. Normal? Boring? Someone who works a ranch and sleeps through the night without nightmares?" She looked at him. "Is that stupid?" "No, it's human." They sat with that truth for a while. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain that probably wouldn't come. Wyoming was like that. All promise, little delivery. "What do you want, Evelyn?" Rowan asked. "Not what you think you should want. What you actually want." She'd been avoiding that question for weeks. Months, really. Because wanting things had only ever led to disappointment. But Rowan was looking at her with those steady eyes, waiting for an honest answer, and Evelyn was tired of lying. "I want to stay here," she said. "Work the ranch, help you rebuild. Maybe have a life that's mine instead of one I'm running from." She paused. "Is that allowed?" "Allowed by who?" "By you, by the universe, by whatever decides these things." Rowan set down his coffee and moved to sit beside her. "You don't need permission to want things, and you sure as hell don't need permission to stay on a ranch you helped save." "I didn't save it." "You did. Maybe not alone, but you did." He reached out, taking her hand. "Stay, please. Not because you're running or hiding, but because you want to." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good at normal?" "Then we'll be not good at normal together." She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple." Evelyn looked at their joined hands, his calloused and scarred, hers smaller but equally damaged. Two people who'd been through hell and somehow found each other on the other side. "All right," she said. "I'll stay." Rowan's face transformed, not into joy exactly, but into something quieter and deeper. Relief. Hope. The beginning of something that might become happiness given enough time. "Good," he said simply. The next month was hard work. They drilled a new well upstream from the contamination, hauling equipment and materials they could barely afford. Samuel stayed on permanently, bringing his brother Jack back once he'd healed enough to work. Together, the four of them rebuilt fences, rotated cattle to clean pastures, and slowly brought the ranch back from the edge of collapse. Evelyn threw herself into the work with an intensity that worried Rowan sometimes. She'd be up before dawn, working until dark, pushing herself harder than anyone else, like she was trying to prove something. "You're allowed to rest," he told her one evening, finding her repairing a fence line by lamplight. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted." "So are you." "That's different. This is my ranch. Evelyn dropped the hammer, frustration flashing across her face. "And what? I'm just a guest? Temporary help until I move on?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Rowan struggled for words. This was the problem with feelings. They never translated cleanly into language. "I meant that you don't have to earn your place here. You already belong." Evelyn's anger deflated. She sat down heavily on a fence post. "I don't know how to do that. Belong somewhere without earning it. You learn." "How?" "By staying even when it's hard. By trusting that people want you here not for what you do, but for who you are." Rowan sat beside her. "You're not on trial anymore, Evelyn. You don't have to justify your existence." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the darkening prairie. "My whole life, I've had to prove I was worth keeping, had to be useful or smart or quiet, or whatever people needed so they wouldn't abandon me. And when Thomas left, it confirmed what I'd always suspected, that I'm only valuable when I'm serving a purpose." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Look at us. I'm staying because I'm useful on the ranch, because I can heal animals and work hard. What happens when I'm not useful anymore?" Rowan turned her face toward him, gentle but firm. "I don't give a damn about useful. I care that you're here, that you're alive, that when I wake up, you're still fighting to exist in this world." His voice roughened. "Martha was useful, smart, capable, strong, and I loved her. But I don't love you because you're useful. I love you because you're you." The words hung in the air between them. Rowan hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even fully admitted them to himself until they were out of his mouth. Evelyn stared at him, eyes wide. "You... what?" "I love you." Saying it twice made it real, terrifying but real. "I know it's complicated. I know I'm supposed to wait longer after Martha. I know you probably don't feel the same way, but it's true, and I'm tired of pretending it isn't." Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're an idiot." "Yeah, you've mentioned that. A stubborn, impossible idiot who doesn't know when to quit. Also established." "I love you too." Rowan's heart stopped. "What?" "I love you." Evelyn's voice shook. "I didn't want to, tried not to, but I do, and it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has left or died or betrayed me, but I love you anyway." Rowan didn't have words for what he felt, so instead he kissed her. It wasn't perfect, their noses bumped. Evelyn's lips were chapped from wind and sun. Rowan's beard scratched her face, but it was real and honest and tasted like hope. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn laughed. "We're a mess." "Yeah. This is probably a terrible idea." "Probably." "We're both damaged, broken. We have no idea what we're doing." "True." "And we're still going to try?" Rowan smiled. "Yeah, we're going to try." They stayed on that fence line until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing, making promises they weren't sure they could keep, but would die trying to honor. Later, walking back to the house hand in hand, Evelyn said, "I'm still scared." "Of what?" "That this won't last. That something will go wrong. That I'll wake up and it'll all be gone." "It might be," Rowan admitted. "Life doesn't come with guarantees, but we face it together. That's the difference." "Is it enough?" "We'll find out." The harvest season came hard and unforgiving. Rowan and Evelyn worked themselves to exhaustion, bringing in what crops had survived the drought and getting the cattle ready for winter. Money was still tight, but there was enough. Barely, but enough. They got married in November, quiet ceremony with just Samuel, Jack, and Margaret as witnesses. No fancy dress. Evelyn wore one of Martha's old dresses, altered to fit because Rowan insisted and Evelyn finally understood it wasn't replacement, but continuation. No church, no crowd. Just two people who'd survived hell choosing to build something new. The town talked, of course, whispered about the scandalous speed of it, the impropriety of a widower remarrying so soon, the foolishness of trusting a woman with Evelyn's past. But the whispers had less power now. The truth was public record. Vivian's crimes were being prosecuted, and Rowan and Evelyn had stopped caring what small-minded people thought. Winter hit hard. They lost 3 cattle to cold and 2 more to sickness despite Evelyn's best efforts. The new well froze twice, requiring hours of work to thaw. The barn roof partially collapsed under heavy snow. Some nights, Rowan lay awake wondering if they'd made a mistake. If love was enough to sustain them when reality kept trying to grind them down. But then he'd look at Evelyn sleeping beside him, face peaceful in a way it never was during waking hours, and remember why they were fighting. Not for the ranch, not for pride, but for the simple revolutionary act of choosing each other every single day. Spring came eventually, the way it always did. Slow and grudging, but real. The snow melted. The grass came back. And with it, new beginnings. A young woman showed up at the ranch in April, wearing a torn dress and carrying nothing but a small bag. She had bruises on her face and terror in her eyes. Evelyn met her at the gate, saw herself 2 years ago reflected in that frightened face. "I heard this place takes people in," the woman said, voice barely above a whisper. "People who have nowhere else to go." "Where'd you hear that?" "Town. They said if you're running from something bad, the Cade Ranch is where you go." Evelyn looked back at the house where Rowan was fixing breakfast, looked at the barn where Samuel was tending the new foal, looked at the land that had almost killed them, but somehow became home. "What's your name?" Evelyn asked. "Sarah? Sarah Brennan." "Well, Sarah, you're in luck. We've got room." Evelyn opened the gate. "But you'll have to work. Everyone here works." "I can work. And we don't ask too many questions about where you came from. Your past is your business." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Ranch life is hard. We've got drought problems, money problems, and neighbors who don't like us much. You sure you want in on this mess?" "I'm sure." Evelyn led Sarah to the house, explaining the rules and expectations. Rowan took one look at the girl's bruises and set an extra place at the table without comment. Over breakfast, Sarah told them her story. Different details than Evelyn's, but the same basic shape. A man who hurt her, a system that didn't protect her, a desperate escape. She'd heard about the trial, about Evelyn standing up to powerful people and winning. Decided that if she was going to run, she'd run toward people who understood. After she'd eaten and been shown to the spare room, Rowan found Evelyn on the porch. "We're doing this now?" he asked, taking in strays. "She has nowhere else to go." "I know, but we can barely feed ourselves. Adding another mouth. We'll manage. We always do." Evelyn looked at him. "I was her once, desperate and broken with no options. You took me in. Maybe it's time we paid that forward." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right, but she works. No freeloaders." "Agreed." Sarah turned out to be a hard worker. Within a week, she'd proven herself capable with horses and fearless with difficult animals. She didn't talk much about her past, and nobody pushed. That was the rule on the Cade Ranch now. Your history was yours unless you chose to share it. 2 months later, another person showed up. Then another. Word spread across the territory that Rowan and Evelyn Cade would take in anyone willing to work. No questions asked. Runaway wives. Abandoned children. Men who'd lost everything to drought or debt or bad luck. The ranch became something unexpected. Not just a cattle operation, but a refuge. A place where broken people could put themselves back together. It wasn't easy. They fought constantly about resources, about fair treatment, about how to handle people who brought trouble with them. Money was always tight. Some people stole or caused problems and had to be sent away. Winter was brutal. Summer was harsh. and there were days when Rowan wondered if they were insane to try this. But then he'd see Evelyn teaching Sarah how to diagnose sick animals, or watch Jack mentoring a scared teenage boy who'd shown up with cigarette burns on his arms, or find Samuel patiently explaining ranch work to a widow who'd never done manual labor in her life. And he'd understand. This wasn't about charity, it was about survival, about people who'd been abandoned by the system learning to rely on each other instead. 5 years after Evelyn stumbled into Rowan's barn, the Cade Ranch was known across 3 territories. Not for its cattle, though they raised good stock. Not for its profits, which were modest at best, but for being the place you went when you had nowhere else to turn. Evelyn became something of a legend, the woman who'd been accused of fraud and proven innocent, who'd fought railroad corruption and won, who'd built a community out of cast-offs and survivors. People came from hundreds of miles away bringing sick animals, knowing Evelyn had an almost supernatural ability to diagnose problems others missed. She never charged for it, just helped where she could and sent people on their way. Rowan watched her grow into herself over those years, watched the fear in her eyes gradually fade, replaced by confidence that came from surviving every disaster the world threw at her. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at sudden movements, but she was healing. They both were. One evening, sitting on the porch watching the sun set over land they'd nearly lost a dozen times, Evelyn said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't found your barn that night?" "Sometimes." "You think you'd have sold? Given up?" Rowan considered it. "Probably. I was pretty close to the edge. And me? Where would I be?" "Dead, most likely. Or still running." Evelyn nodded slowly. Funny how one random moment can change everything. If I'd collapsed a mile earlier or later, if you'd shot me instead of helping, if any of it had gone differently. That's not random, that's luck. You believe in luck? I believe in second chances, and I believe that sometimes 2 broken things fit together better than 2 whole things ever could. Evelyn smiled. That's almost poetic. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation as a hard-ass to maintain. She laughed, leaning against his shoulder. Your secret's safe. They sat like that until the stars came out. 2 people who'd found each other in darkness and built something that mattered. The ranch wasn't perfect. They still struggled with money and weather and difficult people, but it was theirs, built on stubbornness and survival and the radical belief that broken people deserved second chances. 20 years after that first night, Evelyn stood at the same barn entrance where she'd collapsed. The barn had been rebuilt twice, the house expanded, new buildings added to accommodate the rotating cast of people who called the ranch home. A young woman approached, leading a sick horse. "Miss Cade, I heard you could help." Evelyn studied the horse. Symptoms she recognized immediately. Colic. Not serious yet, but it will be if we don't treat it. Can you save her? Probably. Bring her inside. As the woman led the horse into the barn, another figure appeared at the gate. Younger girl, maybe 17, wearing a dress torn at the hem and carrying a bundle. Her face showed fresh bruises. Evelyn's heart ached with recognition. She walked to the gate, studying the girl's frightened eyes. "You lost?" Evelyn asked gently. "No, ma'am. I'm exactly where I need to be." The girl's voice shook. "I heard this place takes people in, people who are running from bad situations." "We do, but it's not charity. Everyone here works." "I can work. I'm strong." Evelyn saw herself in this girl, saw every frightened person who'd ever showed up desperate and damaged, saw the choice she'd made 2 decades ago to keep fighting instead of giving up. "What's your name?" Evelyn asked. "Claire." "Well, Claire, you've come to the right place." Evelyn opened the gate. "We've got room. Always have room for people willing to start over." Claire's face crumpled with relief. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay." "You don't repay. You just pay it forward. Help the next person who shows up at this gate. That's all we ask." Evelyn led Claire toward the house, where Rowan was working on accounts in the kitchen. He looked up, saw the girl's bruises, and immediately stood to make coffee and prepare food. They'd done this dance 100 times. It never got easier, but it always felt right. Later that night, after Claire had been fed and shown to a room, and the sick horse had been treated, Evelyn found Rowan on the porch. "Another one," he said. "Another one," she agreed. "You ever get tired of this?" Sometimes. You? Yeah. But then I remember what it felt like to have nothing, to be alone and desperate with nowhere to turn. Rowan looked at the darkened ranch buildings. This place saved us. Only fair we use it to save other people. Evelyn sat beside him, taking his hand. They were both older now, worn down by years of hard work and harder decisions. But they were still here, still fighting. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked. Rowan thought about it, about Martha, buried on the hill behind the house, about the years of struggle and near poverty, about the choices that had led them to this moment. "No," he said finally. "Not one." "Not even the hard parts?" "Especially not the hard parts. Those are what made it matter." Evelyn nodded, understanding completely. The easy victories meant nothing. It was the battles you almost lost, the moments where you chose to keep fighting when quitting would have been simpler. Those were what defined you. "I used to think I was ruined," Evelyn said quietly. "When Thomas left, when my town turned on me, when those men beat me, I thought I was broken beyond repair. And now? Now I know there's no such thing as broken beyond repair. There's just broken, and what you choose to build from the pieces." Rowan squeezed her hand. "What did we build?" Evelyn looked at the ranch, the buildings filled with people who had nowhere else to go, the animals healing from abuse and neglect, the land that had nearly killed them but became sanctuary instead. "Home," she said. "We built home." They sat together under the vast Wyoming sky, watching distant lightning flash on the horizon. Storm coming, probably. There was always another storm coming, but they'd survived every one so far. A person wasn't defined by what destroyed them, Evelyn had learned. They were defined by what they chose to build afterward. And she and Rowan had built something that would outlast them both. Not a perfect place. Not a rich place. But a place where broken people could learn that broken was just another word for human. Where second chances weren't earned, they were given freely to anyone desperate enough to ask. Where survival was the beginning, not the end. And where two people who'd lost everything had found exactly what they needed in each other. Inside the house, Claire was settling into her new room. In the barn, the sick horse was breathing easier. Across the ranch, a dozen other people were sleeping peacefully, safe for the first time in months or years. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new struggles, new people needing help. But tonight, everything was quiet. Tonight, they'd survived another day. And for people like Rowan and Evelyn Cade, that was always enough.